now present another ECMAScript 6 feature, which is called Object Destructuring. So if you want the code that you see here at this point, you can check out the tag section 1.4. Now, what we have here is a build_person_data function that returns a string. This takes as input an object, and it concatenates several properties of the object in order to produce another string. So we pass it in an object, person data, that has here a couple of properties: first name, last name, and address. Now, what is object destructuring? Let's have a look at it. Also, in these next few examples, we're going to start mixing several features of the language just to keep it more interesting. So for example, here we have an example of string concatenation. If you highlight this string concatenation in WebStorm and you hit Alt-Enter, you have here an option replace with template string. So as you can see, this creates a template literal that contains the same concatenation in a more readable way. Now, let's have a look at object destructuring. This scenario here is actually quite frequent. We are passing into a function, we are passing it in an object which has several properties. This could be, for example, a configuration object of a jQuery API call. It could have a lot of properties here. So accessing them using person data.firstname, etc. in multiple places of a function can be quite verbose. So what we might end up doing is something like this. We declare here a variable first name and we assign it to person data. And then instead of typing everywhere person data.firstname, we simply type the name of the locally defined variable first name. And we will do the same for the two other variables. This is what the program would look like after applying the same logic to last name and address. So this is doable, but it's a little bit verbose. We can instead use object destructuring and say that we are receiving an object, but we are only going to use inside this function certain properties of the object. We are only going to use first name, last name, and address. So let's try this out. We have here defined three variables. If we remove these, we can see that the program still compiles correctly. So the function expects an object with three properties and it destructures the object, applying something very similar to what we had here written, but implicitly. So first name is immediately available to be used in the body of the function. Now, what would happen if we would pass in here an extra property? This would still work. So the fact that we pass in an object with more properties other than first name, last name, and address does not break the compilation of the program. What the destructuring syntax means is that we are taking these three properties because these are the only properties of the object that we need to implement this concrete method. So this gives for a more readable and simple syntax. Another feature of ECMAScript 6 that is very closely related to object destructuring, which is a syntax for creating objects, a shorthand syntax. Let's see in which situations this syntax is useful. Let's quickly refactor here the building of the person data object. Let's define this first name as a const. We are going to initialize it. And we're going to do the same to last name and address. So we have here just defined three constants and we have initialized them. Now we are going to use these constants to initialize the person data object. So the person data still has a property named first name, which has a value of first names. So the same name here is used to both the name of the object property and the name of the variable that contains the value of the property. So we would now pass in here also last name and address. And the same applies to address and last name. So let's have a quick look at what we have here. So there is a typo here. It's one of the things that Typescript will allow you to catch at compile time. It's typos. Now this program is equivalent to what we had, but take a look, there is here some repetition. We have here first name and we have here first name again. Here is the name of the property of the person data object, and here it's the name of a variable called first name. This is a very common scenario actually, this happens a lot. So there is a shorthand notation for creating objects that are created in this situation. We can simply type just first name, last name and address. And this is equivalent to what we had before. So this is still creating an object with free properties whose values are the variables that have the same name as the property. So it's a very common scenario, and you can see how this makes the program more readable. This example shows how many of these ECMAScript 6 features are actually related and meant to be used together. So object destructuring is a great way to take an object as an input and extract only a few properties and quickly use them in the body of our function. And the shorthand object creation notation allows you to, for example, quickly create a return type in a function simply using a few of the values that you have just defined. Let's continue presenting some more ES6 features, keeping it interesting, showing how they are meant to be used together mostly. But remember, very soon we are going to dive deep into the TypeScript to type system and see how it helps us to build better programs. And you have noticed, even in these simple examples, we are getting type safety errors. So even in these very simple examples, TypeScript is helping us to write our program.